Building a custom login can be complex. There are many steps when you consider the different features that you need to build: log in, log out, sign up, email confirmation, change login details, and that's just for a simple login system. The Django framework is pre-packed with pre-built functionality so that we can create a simple login system very easily, as I demonstrated in a previous tutorial. In this tutorial, we take a look at a Django package called Django-allauth, which helps us set up a social login. There are two popular packages for comparison: Python's social auth and the Django-allauth package. In this tutorial, I'm going to take you through how to begin the process of building a social login with Django and Google, which will allow users to sign up and log into your site using their existing Google email and password. So let's just go through the process quickly, building a new Django project. So I've made a new folder here on the C drive called Django. So I'm going to go into that, just copy the path and open up the command prompt and type in cd and then change to that path. So now let's just create the virtual environment. So I use Python -m and then virtual environment. So that's going to set up a new folder with the virtual environment inside of the Django folder. So now we've got the virtual machine ready. We now need to activate the virtual machine. So it's inside the folder called venv for virtual environment. And then there's a folder inside of there called scripts. And then inside of that folder we have activate. So now we've got the virtual machine running. Now let's install Django. So now we're working inside of our virtual environment. We need to now install Django. So I type in py -m. We're going to need the pip manager here, and then we're going to install Django. So you can already see that I've already installed Django, but yours should be installed now. So now we have Django installed. I'm going to use the Django admin to create or start a new project, and this project is just going to be called new project. So let's go inside of our folder and have a look, and you can see here I have a new folder called new project. Now that's not what I want, because what's happened here is that we've created a new project and our project will be created inside of this folder, but we want to create the project inside of the Django folder here, so that the virtual environment is at the same level as our root project folder. So let's just delete this file and run that command again, but this time we're going to run the command and utilize the dot afterwards. So this is an additional attribute we can include, and that will mean that we utilize the current folder, which is Django, for our project. So if I run this, you can now see that we've got the manage.py and the new project folder inside of our home or our project directory, which is the Django folder. So the last step, we now need to create a new app inside of our project. So we can now use the manage.py file to start a new app, and we're just going to call this blog. So now we have our project started, we can now configure the authentication. So here we're going to be utilizing Django-allauth package. So first of all, we're going to need to install it. So once we've installed the package, we'll head straight over to the settings.py file, and in here we're going to add the installed apps, include the authentication backend or define the authentication backend settings. Then we need to set up a site ID, a login redirect, and a social account providers. So let's start by going over to the new project folder, and inside the settings we'll open this up. So the first step we need to do was to define the installed apps. So here, if you remember, we did make a new app called blog, so we just need to add that first. So now we need to install the authentication package, the Django-allauth. So here in the documentation, we are running through the installation. So by all means, head over to the Django-allauth documentation and just have a look through the first steps. So here you can see that we need to install by typing in pip install Django-allauth. So I head over to my terminal and I type that in. So now we've installed the package, head back over to the settings file, and we need to now define all the installed apps. So there's a few apps that we need to define. So the first one is the Django contrib sites. So it is imperative to have the Django contrib site feature enabled. So if you have a look at the manual, it's a hook for associating objects and functionality to a particular website. So I would presume that because the allauth package provides functionality to configure authentication of multiple sites or instances, you would need this to interface or differentiate between the sites in some way. So next we need to add our blog back. So I did remove that initially. You might have noticed we did already include this in the installed apps. So I placed that below the contrib sites. So it is important that the Django contrib site is above the rest here. And then we add the allauth package, and then the allauth account, and then the allauth social account. And then finally, we need to add the provider. Now in this case, we're utilizing Google. So if you head over to the allauth documentation, you'll see here that there are plenty of different providers that you can enable. And you'll be familiar with most of these, Discord, Dropbox, Amazon, Facebook, and so on. So here we have the Google allauth provider. So now that we've declared all of our installed apps, if you move down and just below the templates, I've added a new section called Authentication Backends. So here we declare what backends we want to authenticate against. So here we're going to obviously be utilizing the allauth backend to authenticate users. And we're still going to be utilizing, for example, the admin. So we want to also authenticate against the original Django model backend also. So when we run the migrate in a second, we're obviously going to be able to create a super user to log into the Django project. So here we want to authenticate the admin for that, as well as utilize the allauth authentication backend. And then finally, at the end of our settings file, we add the site ID equals 1. So here we can have multiple site IDs. When we get into the database, this will become a lot clearer. So we need to include that first. And then we have the login redirect. At the moment, that's just /. And then we're going to create our social account providers. So again, this code has come directly from the manual. So you will find a few examples here in the manual. So by all means, if you're looking to utilize Facebook, etc., then just browse over the manual and it should give you instructions on how to utilize the social account providers. So now we can go ahead and run a migrate. So I run make migrations, which I don't need to do, and then I migrate. So now that's finished, let's create a super user and have a look at what's been created. So let's just create a super user. So that we can log into the database. Here I'm just going to be using admin. And a password admin. So now we have that in place, let's just run the server. So I type in py. Okay, so let's head over to the the server. So we'll just log in. Upon logging into your Django administration area, you'll see that if you're familiar with this section, you would normally see the authentication and also authorization section here, groups and users. And of course, the user that you just created, the super user, in this case I created, was admin. So you can see some additional models now. So for example, sites, social accounts, social application tokens, and the social applications. So before we head into some of these different settings, first of all, let's just give you some more information on what this site ID refers to. So at the moment, the site ID equals 1. Now by default, when you install authenticate package or create the models here, inside of sites, there's an existing option here called example.com. So here you're in this sites area, you're defining the website where you want the authentication to be placed. Now example.com, this entry here would be site 1. Now I've just made a new site entry, which was 127001, using port 8000 because that's what we're going to be setting up here the authentication for. So because I made this new one here, instead of just editing this here, you just need to be careful to make sure that you change the site ID from 1 in the settings file to number 2. Obviously what you can do, like I've alluded to, is that you can just go into here and edit this if you want to. But I just wanted to point that out. So we've already moved ahead and migrated the database and created a super user. But the next steps after configuring the settings file is to migrate the database and create a super user and view the database. And once we've done that, now we're going to create a home template. So we're just going to build a simple index page for the home page, and then we're going to configure the URLs. So there's 2 URLs that we're going to configure in this example. We're going to configure the home or index page and also the accounts. So the accounts directory that we're going to configure is where all the authenticate configuration is going to be placed. So we'll have a look at all the different pre-created templates that authenticate presents us with when we create the accounts URLs. So we have already migrated the database and configured a super user. So if you have skipped ahead, you just need to go back to the last stage of the last part or the last section and just migrate the database and create a super user. So I'm just going to go ahead and create the templates folder. And then inside of that, a new folder called blog. And then inside of there, we're going to have a new file called index.html. So in my index file, I've simply just copied and pasted the Bootstrap starter template. And then in the middle here, I'm just creating a simple container, which is going to be placed in the center of the page. And we're going to create a simple if-else end if statement here. And I'm just going to check to see if the user authenticated. If the user is authenticated, so user.is authenticated, then we're just going to welcome them and include their username. Of course, if they're not logged in, we're going to ask them to please log in. Obviously, you can change this to whatever you like. But here we're just utilizing this just to show that the fact that the user is logged in, just to confirm that the user has logged in. So now that I've got my index template, I've headed over to the new project folder. Inside of here, the URLs. And at the moment, we have the path to the admin. So we're going to create 2 paths here. We're going to need the include. And we're going to also import the template view because we're just going to run the index page from the template view. So first of all, I'm going to create the accounts path. So here you'll notice that I've included the authenticate URLs. So we're going to use all the default authenticate URLs and I'm going to show you them later in this project and what that means. We'll be able to access all the default templates for the authenticate package. And then we also then need to configure the path for the template, which is the index page. So here the template resides in the folder called blog, in the templates, and then index.html. So we should now be able to test the home page. So just check to see the server's on. And if I head over to the home page, we now have template does not exist, because I just need to now go into my settings file and configure the templates. So if you're using Windows, inside the settings template, if you go over to the template area, I've just typed in os.path.join and then open parentheses base_dir and then define the template folder. So that's what we need to include. So if I go back into my web page and refresh, now the template's working okay. Notice also that it welcomes admin because we are actually still logged in as the user we created when we built the super user. Now yours might not say admin, it depends on what super user you created. So as I've alluded to, the All-Auth package comes with some pre-built templates. So in our URLs, we configured our URLs to include these templates, and we gave it a path of account/. So if we just were now to type in accounts/, we can now see some of the different pre-configured available paths that we have. So we have a sign up, /signups, login, logout, password change, password set, and so on. So if I were now to, for example, type in sign up, if I spell it right, so we're already logged in, so we're not going to be able to access that. So if I type in logout, this is going to take us to a logout or a sign out, so I can actually click this button. So this template, to reiterate, is a pre-built All-Auth template, which we can configure, and we'll go through that later in the tutorial. So I can now sign out. So you can now see that when I sign out, it says, welcome friend, please log in. So let's head over to the account login to see what that looks like. So at the moment, we can sign in and sign up. So the sign up should take us to a form, which we'd probably want to configure. And sign in will take us to this page here, which has the username and password. So if I were to type in admin and admin, I can log in as admin. So let's just log out or sign out again. And I go back to the accounts. Trying to get in the idea now, we've got login. So here we've got the option here of Google. So this is where we can click this option here, and you can see that there's an error at the moment. But this is where we're going to click Google, and that's going to take us to the classic Google login page. There we can type our Google email address and password, and then that will get used to authenticate to our site. So that's the next stage that we now need to configure. So we're now ready for the next step, so the Google authentication. So first of all, we need to head over to the Google Cloud Platform and then just sign up if you haven't already got a Google account. So once we've signed in, we'll create a new project, and the outcome will be that we'll have a set of keys. So these keys will be utilized within our database, and then we'll configure the database for the Google authentication. And then there we go. We should then be able to authenticate using Google. So I type in Google API and then click on the Google Cloud Platform, so console.developers.google.com. And then we're just going to sign in. So from here, we're going to need to add a new project. So at the top here, I click, just remove that, and then I can select new project. So give your project a new name. I'm just going to call this VA Google Auth, and then I'm going to press create. So now with your project selected, or your new project selected, now the first thing that you can have a look at is the credentials. So what we need to do here is to configure a consent screen, or we could do at least configure a consent screen, external, and then press create. So by all means, have a look through these settings here. You can add support emails, application logo, and name, etc. So by all means, add a new name, Django-allauth app, and just press save. So there isn't really anything that we need to do to get our application working in that area. Now, let's just go over to credentials. So what we need to do here is create some credentials. So we're going to be utilizing the OAuth 2.0 client IDs. So let's create some credentials here. OAuth client ID. And the application type is going to be web application. So the name, we just call this auth app, Django, and then we need to add a URI. So here we're just going to type in http ://127.0.0.1:8000. That's where our project resides. And then we need to also include the authorized redirect URI. So this isn't something that we just make up. If you have a look at the AllAuth documentation, there are details there of what needs to be placed. So in this area, I type in http ://localhost. That's where we're serving our web page from, and then port 8000. And then we need /accounts /Google /login /callback/. So once you've got that in place, just zoom back out and press create. And then you're presented with your client ID and your client secret. So by all means, copy that because we're going to need that in a second. But we can get back to that point in a minute if you haven't. So press OK. So now let's head over back into our database. So just make sure that the server's turned on, and we're going to go to the admin area. So just sign in as admin. So we've already pre-configured sites. If you remember, we've added a new site, or you might have used the original here. So just remember, this is site 1 and this is site 2. The 127.0.1.1 blah is site 2. So remember that inside of your settings file, you need to include number 1 or number 2. So number 1 will be if you've changed the example.com to the local address, or if you've included a new entry here, like I have, this is going to be site number 2. So just make sure you've got that in place to begin with, and then we can move on. So with that configured, let's just have a look at social accounts. What you're going to find in this model, or this part of the database, or this table, is when someone signed up or logged in using their social account, their Google account, the accounts are going to be shown in this area. So coming out of that table, the social application tokens, again, there's nothing inside of here that we need to configure to set up our login. So let's head over to the social application table. So inside of here, we need to add a social application. So this is going to be a Google, and we're just going to call this Google API. And then we've got the client ID. So here, what we can now do is just go back into our, actually we can rename it to this. So I'm going to rename mine to the auth app Django. And now if I click on this option here, that's going to copy the ID, the client ID. But in actual fact, we're going to need both keys. So the client ID is here. So I copy that into the client ID. And then we have secret key and key. So we don't use key with Google, we only use the secret key. So we can copy the client secret, what it's called in Google, over to the secret key. And we need to apply that to our site. And notice that I created 2 sites, site 1 and 2. So I need to apply it to 127. So I choose that one and select this option here and press save. So now that's configured. Let's now log out and let's go back now into accounts and log in. So now if I press Google, I now have the error, which is the error 400 redirect URI mismatch. So this problem is fairly simple to resolve. If you go back into your Google API service here and select credentials, if we go back into this option here and just reconfigure it, if you notice earlier, I didn't actually configure this correctly. I used localhost and not 127. So I've changed that over to 127.0018000 and I've just pressed save. So once that's in place, it might take a couple of seconds before then the account works, but you can now see that it is working. So if I go back here into the accounts login and select Google, it now takes me to choose an account. So I choose my account and there we go. It now welcomes me. So it says welcome Very. So Very is the first name that I've included in this account that I've made up to show this example. So it shows me the first name of my account. Now what I can also do now is go into accounts and then /logout, or logout. And then here I can actually sign out. I can also change my email. There's a form here to change my email. And like I said, we can sign out. So I'm just going to sign out. So there we go. We've now actually signed in using a Google account. So let's now go into the database and see what's happened. So I'll go into the admin area. And we can now see that in users, I have a new user here. This is my email address, or my Google email address, first name and last name. That's been taken from my Google account. And then also the username is been defined as Very. Now, if someone else were to sign in using their Google account and their first name was the same name as something that already exists in our database, what would happen is that Django would increment this to 1. So it would say Very 1, Very 2, Very 3, and so on. So that's how multiple users with the same first name will be managed by Django. So if we go back now into these social accounts, we should have now, a new social account. And you can see here that's who I've just signed in as. And if we then look into the social application tokens, you can now see that there is also an entry here for the user that's just logged in, me. So I haven't finished yet, but let's just summarize here. We have now created a simple application for social login. We've implemented the Django-allauth application and then configured it. And then we've configured the Google API to allow us to log in using our Google email. So the last thing I want to just go over is template overwrites. So by default, as I've alluded to before, the allauth package comes with its own templates. So I guess the question is, well, how do we override these templates? So let's just find where the templates that the allauth application is being used are placed. So if I go into my Django project, I've got the virtual environment. Inside of here, I've got the lib folder and then the site packages. So if you remember, we installed allauth. So this folder here has a folder called templates, and this is where you're going to find all the templates that's being used. So let's just open the Open ID, and we have a login. For example, if I go to account, we have a login again, a log out, a sign out. So let's just go into the login. We're going to open that up. So this should look fairly familiar because this is what we've been utilizing to log in. So we can utilize some of this code to actually create our own login pages. So let's think about now how we can overwrite this. So if you want to make your own templates for this project, then simply just go back into your templates folder, and then inside of here, create a new folder called accounts. So for example, if you wanted to make your own custom login page, then we're just going to create a new file called login template.html. So it's important before you start building templates, you just go into the all-auth documentation and have a look at the template tags that are required. So for example, if you wanted to use the social account tags, then you would need to use the load social account in order to do that. And there is a whole host of different options here that are available, so it's well worth reading through that. So here's an example. We created the login page and I've just copied and pasted Bootstrap template, and I've added a new container here and created a form. And here what I've done is I've created a simple login form, and then I've included the provider login URL to Google. So there's going to be a button where you can click and log in via Google. So notice that I'm using the load social account at the top here. So this code is available in the repository, so by all means have a look at it. This is just an example. I'm not going to go through line by line. So the point is that if you've got a template in here that's the same name as the original template from all-auth, it's going to overwrite the original template and it's going to use the template that you've created here. So now then, if I just go into my project and I would just need to log out, and if I go back into the login, it should now be utilizing this template. Sorry, I'm in the admin section, so I need to go to account login. Okay, that's not happened. Apologies, I've made a mistake here. I need to rename this folder. So the folder should be called account, not accounts. There we go. So if I go and refresh this page now, you can see that it's now utilizing my template. And in here, I've got a big button here, sign in with Google, and that's going to take me to the sign in. Now notice it didn't ask me if I need to, it didn't ask me to sign in, it just automatically signed me in. So you'll notice that if you go into your database and have a look at the social accounts table, here a token has been made and it expires on May the 31st. So you won't need to actually log in again physically until this expires. So moving back to templates, we created a login template, so you can do exactly the same thing for the logout template and so on. So all the templates you can see here can be overwritten by your own templates. And of course you can utilize these templates or the code within the templates to help support you develop your own templates. So it gives you an idea of the tools, the code that you're going to need to create your template or extend the template that's here. Thank you very much for listening to this tutorial. Hopefully there was some value in this tutorial and you can now take this step further and explore further the login, logout and authentication process. Of course, there's much more to do in order to get this to a place where you might utilize it in production. But like I said, hopefully this will help you move towards those steps. So this definitely isn't the end of social or login systems. I've created 2 tutorials now with login systems. First, the basic login system via Django, and now looking at social logins. So over time, I will create more complex login systems, more in depth, and eventually we'll create a whole login system which includes all of the different options and features you would expect to see in a login system. So again, thank you very much, and hopefully I'll see you in the next tutorial. If you do have any suggestions for tutorials, please let me know and leave them in the comments.